This is our first one, but I think we're going to have some fun.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. I want to get a quick introduction of everybody. I am Charmayne Brown, right? So this is the first time we're going to have this. It's like a community town hall. We're going to talk about some of the things that are important to the African American community. We can take national issues and make them local, but I want you to be able to have a candid conversation about what's going on in the African American community. First, we'll start with Sherman Lee Jr. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, well, my name is Sherman Lee Jr. Thanks for having me today. I am the owner and executive director of a human service agency called New Hope Support Services. I'm also the national vice president for the National Association of Blacks in Criminal Justice, and also currently serve as the president of our local Omega Psi Phi fraternity chapter here in Roanoke Valley.
Is it appropriate for me to say, ooh, yeah, yeah, this is McLean in the house. Go ahead. Yes, thank you. Miss Anita Price.
Hello there, and thanks for having me. My name is Anita James Price. I am a retired educator, 35 years between Baltimore and Roanoke cities. Served 12 and a half years on Roanoke City Council as the first African American woman on council, and first to serve as vice mayor. And I recently retired from serving on council, and currently trying to navigate retirement.
Are you enjoying that?
I haven't had a chance to find out yet. But it is nice to not always have to wake up and go, what happened now? So, but yes. But I am keeping busy.
I know.
Yes.
We know you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Fred Hatch Jr.
Hello, and thank you for having me as well. My name is Fred Hatch Jr. I'm currently a Roanoke resident. I work in Roanoke. I went to school at Roanoke College. I have been around the world, and honestly just am loving the environment that we have here, and I cannot wait to get this started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Nicole Ross.
Yes, thank you for having me on the show. I am very excited about being here. I am the CEO of Youth Enrichment Services of Southwest Virginia, a youth program where we can plan our programming into any four walls. So we're very excited about what we're able to do. I also serve as an evangelist in my church, Paradise Cathedral. And let's see, what else do I do? I am one of the spokespersons for the Red Cross. I have children with sickle cell anemia, so I'm always, trying to do something to spread awareness about sickle cell.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and thank you. And let's get right to it. Okay, so we have turned a corner, so to speak, when it comes to where we are in America. We have a transition in the White House and things of that nature. Is there a race problem?
That's funny.
Yes.
Okay, we'll start with you, Nicole. Where do we go with that?
There's always been a race problem, but the issue is, what do we do about it? We've grown a lot. We've made some steps forward, but recently I think we've made some tremendous steps back. What I would like to see is that we really talk about it and stop saying that we don't have a race problem, because we absolutely have a race problem. And we need to really get to the root of that thing, and shows like this to be able to expose and say that this is a problem. Now what are we going to do about it? Knowing that we have a problem, we've always known that, but what are we going to do about the problem? And that's what I would like to see, some systems set in place, some conversations being had about how can we make it better for all Americans. That's what I would like to see happen.
Well, Ms. Anita Price, you were about to say something. How do we make it better? What do we do?
Following behind what Nicole just said, I have always said you can't address what you don't first acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that there is a racial inequity problem, not only here locally, but nationally. It's one of those things that I think that has always been sort of like right under the surface, and everyone kind of felt uncomfortable to really have that conversation. But now that the problem is like right here, we don't have the luxury of saying, that's a touchy subject, let's not talk about race. One of the problems, though, I think that we do have to figure out, and we're getting there, but let's be able to talk about things that make you feel uncomfortable. How do you embrace the fact that there has been this history of inequality throughout the history of the country. And there are a lot of folks who don't want to acknowledge just that component itself. So looking at history and making the decision that, okay, I'm going to have to be okay with feeling uncomfortable talking about things that are very trying and very traumatic for a lot of us.
Fred, you were going to say something?
Yep, totally agree. There's value in that uncomfortable realm, right? That's where the growth really is. And growing up, there are times when people say, you don't talk about race, politics, and religion. Right? Why not?
Right.
Why not? Because if you don't talk about it, if you don't address it, you don't acknowledge it, then why would anything change? Where is that growth, right? When we talk about the history of this country, so many people, myself included, don't actually know the true history of this country. It's Black History Month. There are times where, I question that myself. It's like, why do we have Black History Month? Why isn't it just history, right? And that's where those discussions have to really get rooted into is the actual facts of our country and addressing those, dealing with them. Otherwise, we will never move on.
Sure.
Yeah, well, and I guess to touch at both, first, yes, I mean, as far as racism exists, and, racism has been unmasked here recently, and I would definitely say within the last year, we've always had it, but I think that there's been an awakening, a sense, into some of the racial problems that African Americans in America had to deal with on a daily basis. And it started kind of with the George Floyd incident that happened last year, because, growing up, you got news at 6 and 11 o'clock, and that was the only time that anyone had an opportunity to tell a story or to really tell what happened. Now with social media, we're able to see what goes on, 24 hours a day.
Right.
And people are the reporters, and they're able to tell the stories and tell what's going on. So we're seeing things that are appalling to us, that are having people awaken and say, hey, we need to look at different things, but these are things that have been going on that we're just now, the mainstream is being able to see. So yeah, I think the main thing that we need to do is, and I think what's going on right now is trying to eradicate institutions of racism. And I think when you see with the Black Lives Matter movement, and some of the police, brutality situations, and I think in different practices, a lot of companies are looking at how they practice their normal practices, and they're recognizing there's levels of institutional racism that we can't see, that we didn't notice, and how do we correct them? And so now, I think within the last years, where you've seen a lot of different organizations, even sports franchises, different things, and look at how we're doing business and saying this is kind of embedded in institutional racism that we just kind of took as tradition, but now let's make some changes. So I think that those are the ways that we start first, because to change racism, you have to change the hearts of man. And I think first is changing the institution of how he goes about doing things. And then therefore, when you open your eyes to see, hey, I'm doing this wrong, I think then you can begin to make the changes needed.
Right.
Some have said, though, as I was watching some of the Black Lives Matter movement, some of the protests, it's not just black people fighting for black people. You also have white people fighting for black people.
Absolutely.
I've also seen where some people would say all lives matter, but there's a difference between Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. Those who say all lives matter particularly sometimes say we need to change ourselves, as in black people need to change. Is that something that we work towards, or are we in the space where we need to change, or are we playing the blame game? Are we whining? That sort of thing.
I had a conversation about that with a friend, white friend of mine, and he was wanting to know what could he do and what the issues were. And he talks with his white friends, and they're saying, hey, let's look at the widespread situation. And so what I said, if you look at some of the problems as a community that we have in the black community, are embedded a lot because of racism that was instituted 100 years ago, and the trauma and the generational effects that has. And I give one quick example. When you look in Chicago and you look in LA, a lot of those people who live in these areas, and you have a lot of issues that go on there, a lot of crimes, like killings, especially in Chicago, they're from Mississippi. Their families are from Mississippi and Louisiana, and they migrated there. And they migrated there because of the devastating Jim Crow racism in the South. So they were forced to move north into places that weren't police. They were overcrowded, and so they went into a policing, a survival mode mentality in the north. And that has carried through generations where you had gangs were just trying to protect, hey, this is our property. And we have to protect it because there's so many people that live here, we have nowhere to live. And so that generational thing, if you look, spread it out through 50, 60, 70 years, you have the mentality, you have some of the situations that we look at now and say, hey, these are problems in the African American community, but where did it stem from? And it stemmed from down south. They had to move. They got here. The conditions are horrible. And so I think those are things that if you look at how do we address that, we've seen the issue that's came from so many years. What can we do to address that situation? Because it's unfair, even though we can't see it and draw the line. But sometimes you have to take time and draw the line that says, we're here, how do we get there? And I think you'll see some of the answers and different things that we can do once we get there.
Miss Anita Price.
I was just sitting here thinking about how locally some of those same inequalities that Sherman was talking about has impacted here in Roanoke. I moved here, came here in 1978, and learning the history of Roanoke. First of all, Roanoke I think is fascinating. Let me put that out there. But when you look at some of the recent past history of the city, it does cause you to recognize, well, this is why we've got ongoing systemic problems remaining. The whole area where the Civic Center is, whole communities desecrated and uprooted and torn up in the name of urban renewal. That trauma and pain that families had inflicted upon them, it's ongoing. There are folks who still feel like if it's coming from the government, I can't trust it. If it's so-called, it's good for you, well, how? Show me how. So those kinds of things that have happened, not only, far removed, but right here locally, we still have issues that we have to continue to address. And I know we're going to talk about, what are we doing about it, so when we get to that part.
We'll get there. Yes, ma'am. Fred, you wrote this letter. Fred wrote a letter into the station when the George Floyd thing first happened, and your dad was profound when he was saying that he thought this would be a different space that you would have to grow up in as a young black man. What do you say to that now? Has it changed?
So, obviously I didn't grow up in the 60s and things like that, so I don't have that as a reference, but I do have it through my father and grandfather and that legacy, right? And it actually hit me when he said, he's already fought for this. Why am I fighting for this? And I was like, you know what? Touche.
Absolutely.
This path has been walked, and we're yet continuing to walk it. How long is this path until it opens up into a road or a highway and we're all traveling together? I don't know if it's better, to be honest. Time will tell. Does it feel better? Sure. On Tuesday. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not tonight. Maybe in this setting. Awesome, right? But it changes as soon as you walk out that door. So, that was a really profound statement that my father made when he said that. I was like, you know what? There have been people who have walked this, who have fought for this already, who got us to where we are. Yes, we need to continue the fight, but do we still have to? Why are we still fighting the same way? do we change our tactics? You know, and those are the kind of things that I started really putting some brain power into. Of, you know, how are we fighting? And stop trying to provide the answer versus asking the question that gets us to that answer.
Okay, good, Nicole.
While everyone was speaking, I was just reflecting on the initial question of, you know, Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. We all know that all lives matter. That doesn't need to be said. The Black Lives Matter movement came about because of the things that were happening, and Black lives were being taken. They were being persecuted unfairly. Black people, men predominantly, were being killed. Things like that were happening on a national level. And that's why we didn't just come out of the blue and say, oh, today Black Lives Matter. No, it was because of the ongoing persecution and killing and inequality. That's why we made the statement, Black Lives Matter. And I say we because I'm a part of that. And I'm proud to be a part of that. Because as much as I love every race and the differences, everyone doesn't accept the differences that we have. And my question is, what are you afraid of? And it feels to me like the reason that we're having this back and forth with racism it's rooted in fear. It's rooted in fear. And my question that I would like to pose today is, what are white people afraid that we're going to do? When we look at what happened with the Capitol, and I know we're going to get to that, I'm sure, but the difference was they didn't feel threatened. And that's, in my opinion, is why it was handled differently. When Black people gather, people feel threatened. Why? What is it about us that you are afraid of? That's the main question that I want to somebody to answer for me. And I think that that's what it's rooted in. When people are afraid, they act differently. They feel and they act the way they do towards Black people because there is a level of fear. And we are not evil people. We are not angry people. We are not violent people. We're just people, period. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think the issue is. It's that level of fear that is unspoken, but that is definitely real. When you see, all the people talking and when, they make reference to, a white person driving through a Black neighborhood and they lock the doors, what are you afraid of? And I think that's what we need to deal with. We need to let people know that we are not to be feared. We are educated. We are loving. We are kind. We are family driven. We need to change the look of African Americans, of Black people. We are not angry people. We get angry, but doesn't everybody? So I think that's the issue that stems racism, in my opinion.
Let me ask you this, just the flip side of it. Has it changed the way any of us, because I'll answer this too, has it changed the way we now deal with white people? Fred, go ahead. You're shaking your head.
I'm no filter. When you're going to get all of me, 100%. You ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer.
Absolutely.
Right? I don't sugarcoat it. There are times where I don't really even care about your actual feeling. Right? Because that's just your feeling. I get it. I'll validate it. I'll say, yeah, man, that's cool. I'll acknowledge it. That's awesome. But I'm going to go home and sleep fine. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm tired of hiding in that space where, ooh, can I say this? Can I not say this? I don't want this person to get mad. People say stuff all the time. Social media, insane in that realm. Keyboard warriors, they'll go out there and say whatever they want.
So it's changed the way.
Yeah, so now I just deal with it directly, honestly. And I have a couple of folks that I talk with consistently on a variety of issues, and it's been enlightening for me because I get to learn a little bit about them. I learn how they were brought up a little bit, and some of the fear that was not actually driven by Black people, but actually driven by white people into other white people about Black people, right? And it's like, where did that come from? And then after months and years of engaging on that level, I'm like, man, I've learned so much just being around you.
Sherman, has it changed how you now deal with your white friends or different white colleagues?
No, to me it hasn't. I want to say it may be a different because I really do think that a lot has happened, has been an awakening for white people to see the consistent treatment of African Americans in this country. So I think a lot of times, you know, when we talk about it, but to me, it's, you know, I seen the George Floyd, police brutality. This is what's happening. These are the changes that we need to make. So for me, it's just been, you know, not a change in terms of my interaction, but I hear the questions. I hear the, what should we do? How do we make changes? So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. That is the aspect that does help because, to answer your question, no. Why would I change how I deal with any of folks that I come into contact with? I'm going to be honest with you. As long as we can have a respectful and valid conversation, yeah, I'm going to be upfront with you. One of the things that I kind of feel like is different this time, because yes, I am a child of the 60s. I feel like the whole broad spectrum of the issues themselves are so much more right here in our face. Growing up, I felt removed from, you know, really being hurt because I grew up in segregation. The schools I went to were segregated. So it wasn't until the first time that I was able to go to an integrated junior high school, and this was during the time when there was so much racial unrest, that I was fearful. I mean, my parents, everybody, our community, we were fearful for us as kids to go into, to be introduced into an integrated school. But I will say that even back then, and that was like in 1964, there was a group of white kids that came up as we got off the bus and said, "It's about time y'all got here." So from that experience, what it taught me is that there are white folks who have been our allies, who do get it. It's those who, for whatever reasons, choose to not want to engage, who don't want to have a conversation, who don't want to get to know you. Those are the ones that really give me great pain, because it's almost like we're getting more and more entrenched. And that, to me, is what feels so much different now. It's as if I'm going to dig in. Those who do not want to acknowledge that we should all be respectful of one another. Those who are just adamant that black folks, no. That's what caused me a lot of trepidation.
Nicole?
I wouldn't say it's changed me. I was fortunate enough growing up to where I went to Wimberg. You know, I was the only black person in my classes. So I always felt that the difference that was there. But I grew up with a lot of white friends. I mean, some of my best friends, you know, Kelly Orr. I had some great, I cheered, you know. I had great people around me that didn't show a difference in color. So I don't think it changed how I interact today, but it did make it more aware. I'm more aware, and I see it everywhere now. Before, I would say, you know, I knew racism was there, but I had never really personally experienced anything, you know, that was troubling to me, that was traumatic. But now I see it everywhere, and that's what I don't like. I don't like that because of where we are now, it's changing my lens. Now I'm seeing it everywhere because I'm hearing it everywhere. Does it make me feel a type of way towards white people? No. But I don't like the fact that everywhere I look, I see racism now. Before on my job, I never saw it. But after everything that happened, I started to say, well, why is it that there are no black people in leadership? And, you know, it brings about a sense of awareness that you may have overlooked or suppressed for whatever reason, but everything is coming to the top now. And it doesn't change me. Well, I guess it does change me because it changes the way I view things, and it changes the lens at which I see things through. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. I don't know. But I don't like that everywhere I look now, it's like I have to make a conscious decision of how I'm going to respond, where before I could just do me. But now I have to consciously decide, am I going to be offended by this? Is this going to offend me? You know, what did they mean by that? It causes you almost to second guess, you know, your thoughts or people's intentions now. Well, were they nice to me because I'm black? Did they include me because they needed someone black? You know, it really does change. It's changed the way I view. Yes, I have to change my answer. Yes, it has.
Is it okay to be included because you're black?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah,
Should be. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I think that that's how when we look at affirmative action and what it was rooted in. There's an unfair advantage because of the institution of racism. So certain things, a lot of times, the opportunity and the experience for African Americans in this country, they don't exist because there wasn't an opportunity doors for them to be in there. So sometimes there is, hey, we're going to give an opportunity for someone to come here to absorb the experience and the knowledge that they now can pass along and to help others to come the way. And I think that that's important for businesses, institutions to say, hey, we need other blacks in the room to know the perspective of where they're coming from so that we can be sensitive in how we go about conducting our business. A lot of times when you see different businesses, institutions, and it comes like, ooh, that's very insensitive, or did you not think, you know, an inclusive way to, because you don't have people at the table who can share thoughts and ideas and the sensitivity of where we're coming from. So I think that that's very important to have in any situation, to make sure that you include diversity, period.
Ms. Anita Price?
Well, I was also thinking that yes, it's important to have that black perspective. One of the things though that does bother me is that I don't want anyone to think that, you got this job because you're black and because we needed someone to check that box. I feel that it's important that everyone recognizes that black folks have value, they're intelligent, so accept me for who I am and not for the color of my skin. And I think that's important to keep in mind as well. There's some who feel like, we need to fill a position because we need a minority. Yes, but also we keep in mind that person has earned
That position.
That position.
When I took my first job in TV, I was in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was the only black reporter at the time. And somebody said to me, you know you got this job because you're black. And I said,
Yes.
well, I'm going to keep it because I'm good.
There you go.
So,
And I don't
There
think
you go.
anything's wrong with that.
There you
I
go.
think that
That's it.
people need to have
A
a diverse.
diversity.
So this
Absolutely.
person getting the job. Now you keeping it is
Because
based
you're
is because you're good and on your merit. But in a lot of things, we don't get the opportunity to get to the table.
Yes.
So yes, I'm not. If that's you're here because you're black, I'm fine with that. Now keep the job because of your talent and your skills. Now that because we need to be at the table, I think that once we get to the table, now we can show our skills. We just denied the access for so long. So I think that is important too.
Fred, you were going to say something?
No, I think 100%. Get the job, keep it on your merit, right? But I also don't want, and I think this is something that sometimes happens on accident, is now you become the spokesperson for all blacks, for all African American, and you're like,
I can't speak for everybody.
sample size of one, so sometimes that's the burden sometimes that comes with that, with that diversity, with that you're the one. There are so many times where I've been in college classrooms, my high school, where I was the only African American, and when they needed a diverse thought,
Ta-da!
that was it, right? It was
weight of the
just
world
me.
on your
I
shoulders.
was the community, right? At age 11,
Oh, goodness.
at age 9, at age 14, right? I've never seen that happen to any other race in my, like, where you are the spokesperson all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I think that's a level of burden that, as African Americans, you kind of come with, because we're 13% of the U.S. population.
Mhm.
So being that, right now you got to think, we've been in this country so much. How many firsts? The first African American on city council.
Right.
It's so many. So we're always going
And
to
look
be.
how long it took.
Yeah, how long it takes. So it's going to be the first. There's a level of burden and responsibility that I say that we carry because every day we're breaking down more barriers, and we're the only one in the rooms, in a lot of the rooms that we're able to get to now because of the opportunity, because of the sacrifices that so many people made before. So I do think that, even though it's kind of, we didn't ask for that burden, but I think it's still there that, that we push forward with that.
How do you carry that? Is it a badge of honor or is it a burden? How do you carry
It's a
that?
little bit of both. A little bit of both.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could say that.
Yeah.
I think, it's one of the things that you could take with pride. It's two ways to look at it. It's an unfair burden, I would say. But, for me personally, I look at it as I want to represent well. I want to go in and be the voice. I want to speak and be someone who could take and lead the issue and say, hey, these are the things that important to my community.
Mm-hmm.
And I can represent, and I do take it. I want to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
you
You can take it from the boardroom to Big Mama's house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basketball court or to, you know what I'm saying? You can take it to the smallest level to the highest level. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I totally get that. Let me ask you guys one word. You can think about it for a second. What does privilege mean to you?
Not having to think about how I'm going to achieve something. It's just there. Given to you.
That's a great question. I think privilege is like also what Mr. Sherman Lee said. It's a gift and a curse. It's a gift because it's something that you didn't necessarily have to earn. It was given to you. But it's a curse sometimes because those who have it don't always understand how to operate in it. And you get singled out because you have privilege. You get ridiculed because you have privilege. I'll give an example. I grew up, we weren't rich by any means. Let's be clear on that. We lived in Wilmot Farms, one of the first black families in there. And I always felt almost a sense of guilt because I had more than some others. So I had to learn how to appreciate all that my dad had accomplished and given to me without being ashamed of it. So it was like I have all this stuff that a lot of my friends don't have, but then I had to tuck it away sometimes because I didn't want anybody to think that I felt like I was better. So it was tough to manage and migrate through that. Are you proud of what you have, or are you ashamed of what you have? Does what you have make people not want to be a part of you or not like you because you have? I wouldn't wear my new clothes sometime because my mom she got a shopping demon and she was a shopaholic. So when my friends would come over and I had all of these clothes in my closet that had tags on it because I didn't want to keep wearing new clothes to school. So I was privileged, but it was a burden. It's tough.
Fred, you were going to say?
So for privilege,
That's a tough question.
yeah, it is. There's a lot of aspects to that, I guess. Really, just I would say it's the act of doing something without even realizing that others can't even do it. And that's the awareness, right? Of you don't even realize that others have been trying to do this forever, and you're just walking down the street doing it, and you have no idea. Or it's something that is easy to do for you, but that's not as easy for others. Something like that. It would be how I would kind of define privilege in this kind of setting, outside of the definition.
Okay. Charmayne?
I say privilege is to receive something without asking for it or attempting to achieve it. That's what I would see it. When you look at privilege in society, I was in a mastermind group with other business leaders, and we were having a discussion one day, and we were talking, and we went back. One of my friends, his grandfather, great grandfather, one was a governor, and then one owned a company, and it just went so far back. He was like a fifth generation owner, and I'm thinking, I'm like, well, my great grandfather probably he, which I know he didn't read that well. He didn't have a good school to go to. So is when you talk about certain privilege, it's that, you know, you're fortunate in the privilege of being white in America is that, you know, you had a foundation that America put your family on for years to work and to be successful. And we sit in the room. Look, for mine, there wasn't the privilege there. It was, we had to figure out how do we go from here to here, where a lot of times it may be passed down without receiving it, without attempting or trying. And so I looked at that, it was eye-opening, like, hey, this is kind of the privilege that we are, that you have. This is something that I'm trying to figure out as we go. You know, the knowledge, some of the aspects of business and different things that as I figure out and try to ascend and try to grow the different things that, you know, have come. So I think that was eye-opening within that meeting. And we were talking about, we had the same discussion because we were talking about after George Floyd, we had the conversation of and we're looking at white privilege, and someone's like, I hate the term white privilege. I'm like, well, let's look at it. Let's see what it is. Look at your opportunities. Look at our opportunities. Now, they similar because we're here, but how do we get here? And what advantages did we have? What privileges did we have to get there? And no matter how, ambitious that my ancestors were, they couldn't achieve it in a segregated Jim Crow society. They just couldn't. The opportunity wasn't there. So that's, dumbing down as privilege.
Miss Anita, you want to add something?
I think that summarized it perfectly. As far as, I guess the only thing I would add is that through our collective experiences, privilege obviously has different meanings. And yes, it's a privilege to have served in the capacity that I did. That's a privilege. But when I made the comment, the rhetorical comment about look how long it took to get an African American woman on council, I don't think any of us have ever gone back and examined, why did it take so long? Why did it take some time in 2008 to get to that point? But one of the things that I also wanted to bring back up is the fact that we also elected our first African American president in the history of this country. And for many of us, we've thought that's a privilege we'll never experience. That's something that we'll never live to see in this century. And it did happen. Granted that it came with a lot of backlash, but at the same time, we were afforded the privilege of seeing that happen.
Can I add to that?
Yes, you can add it. Then you next, Fred.
Even in that, which that was a wonderful experience for Black people everywhere. But what I saw was that even though we had a Black president, he was not afforded the same privilege
as
as
being
everyone else.
Exactly, to be respected.
Exactly. He
Yes.
was not always acknowledged as President
Exactly.
Obama. People on camera called him Barack. Things like that might have been subtle. They did not, it was there. I saw it.
Absolutely.
I felt it. I didn't appreciate it, you know. So even though we got there, we're talking about privilege, it took so long to get there. And even on that highest level you could have in the United States of America, there was still a difference in how he
How
was
about
treated,
that? Yeah.
how he was responded to, what he was even able to get accomplished because of the color of his skin. That's a problem.
Fred?
I remember when that happened. That was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, there's also a difference between white privilege and privilege, right? So
Let's go there. What's the difference? Let's
I'm just, when you put in, I mean, African Americans sometimes have privilege, right? So that, I mean, you get a couple folks on a basketball court and you're like, right? So there's a difference for me between white privilege, which is more into the race side of it, right, versus just privilege, and what that means on paper, and then how we live into that. And yes, sometimes they bleed like everything else does, but you know, there are differences between just being privileged, affluent, whatever, you know, and white privilege, you know, which is, I think, much more targeted towards a certain topic.
What do we want to change? As a community, what do we want to change?
Where do we start?
Access.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think access is the I think right now, when you look at civil rights, and you know, and I look at what that generation passed to me, and I stand on the shoulders of them to be able to do the things that I can do. I think for us going forward, it's more so going. It's institutional, as I talked about before, institutional racism. But we need access to be able to provide, I guess, more of an economic base for African Americans in this country. I think the first thing that, you know, when you look at racism and the institution of it and what happened, the government was the first to kind of hire. If you look at, you know, hire African Americans, teachers, high positions, they were the first to kind of integrate, but it's still not in corporate America. And so that access is denied still. When you look at executive positions, I mean, you look at anything from the NFL and head coaches not being black in a league that's 70% African American, just to Fortune 500 CEOs and executives that are in those corporations. Those are the places where I think we're still having a hard time going. But it's also being able to, you know, just provide economic base. I think access to capital, building generational wealth through home ownership and other different businesses, those are things that will help, I think, in the long run for us.
Mutual respect. I think one of the things that bothers me, amongst many, but the fact that we can't be respectful to one another. And I know we could probably talk another hour as to what has happened as far as like with social media and people attack. And what I said earlier about we've become so entrenched, and it's the tribalism. That's the kind of thing that disturbs me so much. We have lost the ability to say, I can have a difference of opinion, but I'll still respect you.
Absolutely.
Now it's gotten to the point, if I don't agree with you, I just as soon cuss you out, never speak to you again, and have absolutely nothing to do with you. I just don't get. When I was a school counselor, we talked so much about how we would resolve our differences by talking it out. What happened to that? It just absolutely troubles me tremendously that we have lost that ability to resolve conflicts with respect, and to just, even if you agree to disagree, that doesn't mean we're going to become, you know, enemies, never gonna speak to you again. And we have seen it at the very highest levels where people have just gotten violent because you didn't do what I thought you should do. So consequently, I'm coming after you.
Absolutely.
It's inexcusable.
So we have access, mutual respect.
Acknowledgement, just in general, like we're here, we help build the country in almost every aspect of it. Half the things that we use today we wouldn't have because black people wouldn't have invented it if we weren't here, you know. Acknowledge of that, and then comes the respect, the dignity, you know, like that's one thing I think that you know, myself can actually do today is, you know, educate myself in where I've done, where I come from, what I contribute to my society, how my society views me. Back to your awareness, you know, making sure I'm socially aware, but then also acknowledge the fact when someone isn't, and I have to put them and make them accountable, but respectfully and with dignity, right? That is one thing I think that, you know, doesn't happen through policy.
Right.
Yes.
That
Right.
happens like this.
That comes here,
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Nicole?
I would say compassion. And that's what I'm fortunate enough to work with young people. Some of the older folks, they probably won't change. You know, it's so rooted in them. But if we could teach compassion to the elementary school, to that level, when we can teach them how to love each other, love each other's differences, accept each other as different, and respect each other. If we can do those things on that level, I think we'll see a different society later. It's going to take years to see it.
Right.
But if we teach it to them in grade school, if we make it such a way that we all love each other, we see all those stories where the little black boy and the little white boy that were the same age and they thought they were twins because they just didn't see anything other than themselves and how alike they were. They didn't even notice that they were different colors. They thought they were twins. That's what, because the innocence is still there, if we could eliminate the hate that gets put into them, and we do that in our classrooms, we do that with our public schools, we do that with our churches, we do that with community, with forums. We teach love and compassion. And if we can instill that in the young people, it will carry on. It will carry on. If they start seeing that, you know what, we're not that different. We do love each other. And it has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. And we all have to be teaching the same message.
Because hate is taught.
Hate is taught. We're not born
Love
hating.
is something that has to be
Yes.
modeled and
Yes.
demonstrated.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It has to be taught, and compassion has to offset that hate. Loving compassion, we can teach these babies how to love each other. And that is my plight on this earth. I will teach compassion to these young people, and they will love each other. We have a zero tolerance for bullying. Mr. Cole, don't play that. We all love each other. We are all great. And if we teach everyone that they're great the way they are and stop trying to make people change, people get jealous and hate each other because they're jealous of one another. But if we teach them that who you are is absolutely amazing, there is no room for jealousy because I recognize that I am fabulous. And so are you. When we can do that and bring all of that fabulousness together and compliment one another. I love competition. I'm probably the most competitive person in the world. But healthy competition. I like to win at all costs. But I hate a cheater. You know, I'm not going to cheat to win, but I'm going to do everything I can to win. So we just have to teach some just basic
That's what
love,
it is. Basic.
compassion, respect. If we can get back to those basic foundational things, and if we all teach it, we'll see a change. But let's mandate that. Let's make that law. Let's mandate the things that should come natural that don't. Let's make those laws. You have to teach this. How do you do that? How do you regulate that?
That's what I was going to
How do you do that? How do you do that?
That's
How do we do
By
that?
modeling,
Yeah, yeah.
you have to demonstrate it.
How do we
You
do that?
have to.
Yeah.
It can't be made into policy. is something that we all have to consciously
Yes.
demonstrate it daily.
Yes.
Because that's something that I think we forget. Children watch us all the time, and they learn from their environment, and what they're seeing right now. How is that shaping them? I mean, just from the isolation, I worry about children as far as their socialization and what's happening with them being isolated and not being in schools and them being seeing so much through social media. Those are the kinds of things that we need to really, really be cognizant of and keep in mind that during these formative years, this is where our children are developing how the constructs of how they treat people is being formulated now. So these are things we have to all be very conscious of.
So would you say that starts at home within
Absolutely.
the African American community? How we treat each other and how we want people
Absolutely.
to treat us.
Absolutely.
This is the golden rule. I mean, that is a real thing. We really do need to follow that. Treat people
The way you want to be treated.
I want to be loved. I want to be respected. I want to be acknowledged for the gifts that I bring. And I want to do that in others. I want to respect people. I want to. It feels so good to see, all of us work with people. So I think you can, agree that when you see someone accomplish something that they've been fighting to accomplish, when you see someone, a young person, grow and make a decision that they would not have made 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, that to me is the most powerful feeling. It's better than any check I could get. It's better than any award I could win. It's seeing these babies grow, love each other, become what someone told them they couldn't. That is, we just have to love and want the best in each other. If we desire the best in the next person, if we're all giving our best, again, what do we have to be jealous of? What do we have to envy in one another? If we're all helping each other to become our absolute best, we live in a great society. We live in a great society when we can do that.
Well, that's what we're shooting for, right? We're trying to
Absolutely.
make this okay with everybody. Any questions that you guys want to go back to that you might have had an epiphany and said, this is what I want to add to that?
Have you ever heard of the platinum rule?
The platinum rule?
Yeah. So it's kind of on the emotional intelligence side of things, of where you're treating others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
So again, to that awareness, relationship management,
Gotcha.
relationship awareness, right? And to that, if the home, is broken, all that good stuff, then it becomes difficult to understand how you want to be treated. Right? If we don't know how we want to be treated,
Right.
it's going to be hard for someone else to treat us the way we want to be treated.
That's deep.
That is deep.
That's it. Yep.
So we need to figure out how we want to be treated, so other people can treat us how we
Well,
want to be
if we
treated.
can articulate it, how will we expect? We're not mind readers by human nature, right? So how do we expect other people to treat us the way we want to be treated if we can't even tell how we want to be treated?
Because we're modeling what we
Right.
have been
Yes.
taught or
Absolutely.
shown.
We're modeling. That's it.
So how do we fix that? How do we fix that? Because it seems like it's broken at the foundation.
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly difficult because we live in a social media society. Everyone has a voice, and the voice that you have now can go viral at any second, or anybody can amplify a small few. Like, if you were upset with something, you had to write a letter to the editor, had to go through someone, and it got in the newspaper, or you did. Now you can just go to Twitter, Facebook, anything, and say and what you said can be amplified, and it can hurt so many people. So I think it's going to be a while for us as a whole, because to be able to, and I think in reality, kind of censorship, if you see what happened with the president, which I'm not sure how people feel about that, but his Twitter was taken away from him. I think you're going to see more of that coming in the future. And I know a lot of people say it infringes on rights and people have the right. But I think there's a lot of things that it's a purpose that everyone, because we don't know the mental illness that people have, but things that people say affect other people. And so for the safety of society, and I don't know how that's done, but I guess some sort of censorship is to keep people safe, to more so. And you can incite a lot of different things, riots.
Yeah, I mean, that social media has
Right.
a lot.
So those are the things that you could do. So I guess we'll see that. But overall, having people to want people to treat you as you want to be treated, it's going to be something that we'll have to look at in the coming future, just because they're evil people who have access, and their voice can be heard. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I don't know how you pull back, but I agree that social media has ballooned into something that we probably did not anticipate. Because even after the George Floyd incident, I found some friends who must have forgotten that we were friends.
Right.
Because some things that they were saying about the whole thing, I was like, wow, maybe you forgot we were friends. So if you feel that way about that,
Right.
you must feel that way about
And you
me.
have good people who say things impulsively who don't think, because the send button is right there.
Right, and you can't pull it back.
And you
once
can't
it's
put it
out
once
there.
it get
Yeah.
out there, it's out in the world. You can't put it back, and it's it may be 100 years before we get a grasp of it, because we're in the infancy stages of it now, and we're seeing how this thing is going to grow, and we've seen the ugly part of it. I think we just saw with what happened on January 6th in the Capitol, is that these things can be tools as weapons of mass destruction, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a mental and psychological standpoint as well.
Because you can't unsee it, you can't undo it, you can't
Exactly.
You can't
unsend
unsay it. Yeah, you can't do it. It's out there.
You can't bring it
And it was
back.
impulsive. You were mad. You weren't thinking. And these are things we just didn't have to deal with 25 years ago.
And I would say, is it, to question that, is it things that you're saying that you weren't thinking, or was it what you were really feeling that now, because of the way society is and how the government changed in those 4 years, that you now feel that it's okay to feel the way you feel openly?
Well,
And I think that's a lot that what we saw. Racism had always been there, but it was not as acceptable. Because of the change in the leadership, it made it okay to be racist. And we saw it more openly because it became acceptable.
Absolutely.
are we
It was
becoming?
unacceptable before, but now it's okay to be a racist, and I don't have to hide behind my career. I can say whatever I want to say because there's someone that supports the way I feel. And I think that's
Right.
what we saw a lot of. It gave people a platform to say how they really felt. And I'll be honest, you know what? I'd rather know how you feel than.
Me too.
But
Yeah. And it gave you a group.
So you'll know
It was
who
a
you're
group that you
dealing
could
with.
stand behind.
Right.
Now, you can't do this because I feel this way, and he feels this way, he feels this way, and I got a group. Because a lot of people, and I'll just say, I mean, I thought that a lot of this last administration and the things that you saw, I was disappointed. There's a lot of people who I thought were very smart people, a lot of
Yeah.
Harvard, Yale degree, that went like, come on, do you endorse this type of situation and things that go on in behavior? I know you were taught better. I know you know better. Why do you condone this? And so I'm hoping going forward that there's a change in just decency. I don't want to get political and talk about politics, but it's a certain thing about decency
Yes.
that I think that people have, and I think that hopefully that comes back. And I think that the measures that I think Twitter took was saying, hey, we just got to
agree.
protect folks.
But I think it goes back to what you were saying, mutual respect, compassion, knowledge, and access. Because have you ever said something that was contrary to popular belief? Or do you feel a certain way? You might not have said it to anybody, but you know how you might feel about a person, a thing. You may not say it out, but you kind of said, I don't really agree with that, or I do agree with that. You just didn't use your platform to speak it. But it makes you either pull back, cringe, or say, yeah, that person's a whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? It's just how you
Exactly.
temper and how you speak it if or not.
I was just going to say real quickly that everything that we just finished, saying, and you summarized, that whole thing about, respecting one another and that kind of thing, it seems like we've become very impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
Society is now just gotten to the point that whatever you say it, and you don't worry about any repercussions. And I think that's the other thing, too, that whole thing that Sherman was saying about decency.
Mm-hmm.
That has also gone by the wayside. And things that, we all thought folks certainly would not condone, sit silent and allow things to continue to fester. It's this whole environment of where we are right now as a society, this whole thing of just acting impulsively and then expecting things to happen instantaneously. I think those are other constructs that we've got to, think about and realize this
I'm glad
whole
you said that.
yeah, this
Well,
whole
here's the
social
thing.
media thing has gotten
Martin
us
Luther
into
King
trouble.
Jr. said it. He says it's not the words of your friends or the words of your enemies. It's the silence of your friends. So your
Exactly.
silence almost says
The
you're complicit.
You're complicit with it. Yes. Yeah, we've got a lot of things that we have seen in these last few years. And it's not just the last 4 years. I think the last 4 years, what it did was, because it's always been there, it's been festering.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Took the lid off.
it took the
And
lid off and
rolled
like, here we
over.
are.
Yeah.
It's just, here's exposing all its ugly glory. So now it's almost like, okay, well, how do we put that genie back in the bottle?
You can't.
And yeah, and that's where we are right now. And we've got a lot of work, but it goes right back to what Nicole was saying. We got to reach the children. We have to reach the children. It pains me when I have seen kids have been brought to environments they have no business being in, where they are hearing racial epithets being hurled. So that teaches them it's okay. You look funny, you look different, so it's okay. It's acceptable for me to demonstrate it, but we have to show the reverse, the opposite of that, that no, that is not acceptable, and pull the lid on folks who stand up and say things that are blatant lies. They have to be called out and told immediately, not after the fact. Oh, that behavior was unacceptable. No, you do it immediately. Then openly. Yes.
All right. Any final comments?
This was wonderful.
This was wonderful.
Oh, my.
Did you get
Absolutely.
something?
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherman. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Nicole. Well, this is not going to be the last one, but I just wanted to see how this would work out, and I think it works out well.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
it's good
putting this.
stuff.
this
Thank you.